Hi all, I'm Janine1010. Today I'll be taking you through the last part of research methodology, not your data collection methodology, not your sampling methodology, but rather your data analysis. Once you have decided on your research philosophy, design, and considered certain methodological choices with regards to data collection and sampling, you'll reach this point where you analyze and present your findings. Of course, the type of analysis that you will conduct will depend largely on whether your study is qualitative or quantitative. Just a quick recap, quantitative research is, as the name implies, it quantifies things. In other words, you are dealing with numbers. An easy way to remember the difference between qualitative and quantitative research is this. What does your girlfriend, or if you are the girlfriend, what do you mean when you say to your boyfriend, I want to spend quality time with you? It means she wants to talk. She wants to know all of your ins and outs, your thoughts, your feelings, the way in which you feel about the world. In other words, she wants to use language. She wants to use words to elicit feelings, and that's exactly what qualitative research is. It aims to get to the heart of people's thoughts, their feelings, their perceptions, and so forth, usually through language. So for quantitative research, we are analyzing numbers, whereas with qualitative research, we are dealing with words, behaviors, symbols, and so forth. Given this, it does not make sense to analyze qualitative words using statistics. No, that would be impossible. We need numbers if we were to analyze things statistically. In the same way, we won't use words to produce statistics and graphs or charts. Okay, so let's start. What is statistics? Statistics is the science of designing studies, gathering data, and then classifying, summarizing, interpreting, and presenting data or information to inform decision making. In addition, it refers to the range of techniques and procedures for analyzing data, interpreting data, displaying data, and then of course making decisions based on this data. We have various sources of data and different levels of measurement, which largely influence the type of test that we can perform when we analyze numbers and produce statistics. Unlike presenting numbers by means of graphs, tables, charts, and more inferential statistics like ANOVA, t-tests and the sort, we tend to use words as our proof to back up our claims in qualitative analyses. Here we use direct quotes, pictures, video clips and the sort to support and present our findings. So as you can see, once you have determined your aims, your objectives, research questions, and the appropriate design, approach, and methodology to yield information that best answers your research questions and invariably achieves your aims, it's important to keep this in mind when analyzing your data and choosing the appropriate method of analysis. There is no point in presenting and analyzing numbers when you want to gain insight and in-depth understandings into phenomena. In the same manner that you should not analyze people's opinion and their in-depth understandings of phenomena when you want to measure and quantify observations. At all times, it is imperative that your research is aligned from the beginning right through to the end. You should not switch between designs, nor the methodological tools available and specific to those designs. If you do this, you will not obtain the answers necessary to answer your research questions and therefore achieve your aims and objectives. This not only wastes your time, but also those of your research participants, which is unethical. And we are all ethical researchers at Menkoza, aren't we? When we talk about quantitative data analysis or statistical analysis, we will focus on concepts such as the normal distribution, measures of central tendency and dispersion, correlation, regression, and the sort. Just as with everything else, there are certain assumptions and limits to all of the tests that we can run. If these assumptions are not met, we'll often not achieve statistically accurate results. And this course will highlight these assumptions. Data is a collection of numbers assigned as values to quantitative variables. When we talk qualitative analysis, we are focusing more on things like thematic analysis, content analysis, grounded theory, discourse analysis, participatory action research, and so forth. As you can see, the emphasis is not on numbers, but rather words, symbols, and the sort that cannot be measured. Sometimes this type of analysis goes beyond words to what people do not say, and this includes how they deploy language to do certain things. Here, data are characters assigned as values or codes to qualitative events. Understanding exactly why people do and say things is not an easy task. And once again, there are certain measures that need to be taken to ensure that this type of analysis yields valid and credible results. Data analysis concerns itself with specific patterns in data and serves as a tool to enhance knowledge. The manner in which knowledge is generated varies. Quantitative research, as a very general rule, is deductive, whereas qualitative research is inductive. What does this mean? Well, this not only has implications for our literature review and the use of existing theory, but also how we come to know what we know. Deductive research involves the application of existing theories to present observations to prove or disprove an hypothesis. Inductive qualitative research, on the other hand, is more theory generating. In other words, we start with our observations on the ground level. Thereafter, we build up to that point where we have a theoretical level. Again, we are concerned with enhancing knowledge. Here we break down knowledge into elements. These elements can involve concepts like motivation and engagement and so forth. They can also involve statements of the relationship between concepts. For example, the relationship between motivation and engagement. In order for us to enhance knowledge, we can break it down into two endeavors: summarization, or the development of concepts, and correlation, or deriving statements about the relationship between these concepts. This development and definition of concepts is crucial when we are looking for and testing relationships between variables. What I will provide is a guide as to how to outline your Chapter 4 and how it should be written up. If you are following both a standard quantitative and qualitative research design. In general, the format for quantitative research is as follows: introduction, response rate, your research instrument, sample characteristics, descriptive and inferential statistics, and then you present these and you discuss them, and thereafter you conclude. In your introduction, you will present your findings, your analysis of results, your discussion of findings. You require a brief introduction outlining the purpose of the chapter and how you will proceed to present your primary findings. You need to conclude in Chapter 3 why certain tests were performed rather than others, with reference to their assumptions, level of measurement, and permissible tests relevant to these levels of measurement. In Chapter 4, whereas, you need to explain what tests you did and the results obtained therefrom, and then you need to present and discuss these findings. When discussing the response rate, you basically need to indicate if the response rate is poor, you need to include a brief reason as to why this is the case, and you also need to discuss the implications thereof. Thereafter, you discuss your research instruments. This includes discussing reliability, and you need to state whether reliability is good or bad, and the consequences thereof on the quality of your output. You also need to include the discussion of validity. You need to state how your study is valid Is it measuring what you said it is, in fact, measuring? We also tend to use factor analysis as a data reduction method to describe the factors that mostly account for the variance in your data. Factor analysis is a very useful way of summarizing what your instrument is measuring, its scope, and you basically provide the table of the factor assignment. If applicable, we also conduct a cluster analysis, all right? And you provide the table for cluster assignments and you discuss the results. Thereafter, we discuss the sample. So we discuss the sample size and the sample characteristics. And in the case of quantitative research, we also discuss representativity and generalizability. And basically, this is where you will present graphically the data from your sample, and you have to explain what your sample demographics consist of for readers to draw conclusions about generalizability and representativity and applicability of findings. Thereafter, you present your descriptive and your inferential statistics. So basically, you will present your findings and you will discuss them. This includes test assumptions and how they were met. You need to present each research question, and under each research question, you need to present the descriptive and inferential statistics applicable to answering that research question. You need to report only relevant statistics. You do not need to include all interpretation as written up for you, example, the conclusion of the hypothesis test and the quoted statistics. Thereafter, you need to provide a brief conclusion at the end of each research question based on the statistics quoted. Once all the research questions have been explored and the statistics provided, you need to provide a final conclusion that briefly concludes everything that was discussed and presented in Chapter 4. If additional findings become explicit as a result of the analysis that exceed your research questions or your research objectives, you need to present it as additional findings. And when you write up your Chapter 5, you can use these to make recommendations for further studies. For qualitative studies, we follow pretty much the same format as is indicated. We have the introduction, we have the sample, and then we have the qualitative analysis, right, whether it's thematic, content, discourse, and so forth. Then we basically highlight the way in which we've identified and derived codes. Then we discuss the core themes that we analyzed and we draw conclusions. The difference between qualitative and quantitative sample characteristics is that, unlike with quantitative studies, it's not determined by considerations for representativity and generalizability. Rather, we focus on people who would most likely elicit the most amount of information to gain insight and understanding into the phenomenon at hand. You won't be presenting graphs, tables, numbers, etc. You will use people's quotes, their expressions, their meaning systems as a means of analysis and evidence to claims. You will need to convince your reader that you, as the researcher, have not influenced or imposed your own interpretation on the findings, but rather that you're reporting things as they were intended by your respondent. In the same way that we use numbers and statistics to back up our claims in quantitative research, we use people's words, implicit meanings, non-verbal expressions, and so forth as proof of our findings in qualitative research. Just remember, unlike quantitative studies, in qualitative studies, our measures of quality are not focused on the concept of reliability and validity, but on concepts like credibility, dependability, transferability, and the sort. Qualitative designs also require a degree of reflexivity from the researcher. So it is important when constructing your research data collection instruments, whether it be quantitative surveys or questionnaires or even qualitative interviews, you need to strongly consider the type and the level of analysis that will ensure that the necessary data is available to answer your research questions. Right, so this pretty much wraps up the introductory lecture. In lectures to follow, we will establish and define basic concepts for both qualitative and quantitative data analysis.